Eric Holder said, "I'm the president's wingman," and he disobeyed the first time a attorney general in the history of the United States was held in contempt. And Trump, this is very ironic, isn't it? Because he's supposedly not transparent. He's a dictator. He's an autocrat. He's Hitler. And he is the most transparent president. He's letting everything out.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup, and there's lots of news on the agenda today, so we will get to those tales. We're going to look at Elon Musk, of course, is making news, Hamas and its failure to honor the ceasefire, and then some things about illegal immigration that I think will probably be generally of interest to us. So stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. Please come join us there. We're making lots of changes to the website, especially for subscribers. And you can subscribe for $6.50 a month or $65 a year at a discount. So come join us. Well, Victor, we have a lot going on, and I thought we would start with Musk and his Doge activities since they've been barred by a judge, Paul Engelmayer, and he's barred them from getting data from the Treasury Department, at least for a week. And so they're having this play out in the courts a bit. But I was wondering your thoughts on this current, they keep calling it a constitutional crisis.
It's not a constitutional crisis. It's one Biden judge, Judge Vargas in Manhattan, and one Obama-appointed judge. I think his name is Engelmeyer. I've written it down here. And they feel that they can tell the executive branch a judge, an unelected lower ranked judge, just a federal judge, not an appeals court, not anything. They feel that they can tell the president who has access to, I shouldn't put it that way, they can tell the president's own cabinet secretary of the Treasury that he has no right to look at the employee records of the people he employs. It's not going to stand up. It's lawfare. It's the same type of thing they did with the 5 civil and criminal suits to bankrupt, ridicule, discredit, jail Donald Trump. But when they say constitutional crisis, they keep using that word, and they do it in 2 contexts, and they're both, everybody, very misleading. The first is that no executive has the right to not spend money that Congress approves. That's up in the court. I mean, we had a line item veto for a while, and the courts ruled against it. That meant the president could just say, oh, the Congress approved that, but it was wasteful, it's stupid, I'm just not going to spend it. That is up in the air legally. But also up in the air is whether a president can just simply not veto it. He just says, I'm just not going to spend the money. We don't have the money. The Congress is wasteful. And if everybody thinks that I'm being too partisan, I'd like to draw your attention to 2 important facts about the Biden administration. The U.S. Congress voted money and sent it to the president, and it was signed to build the wall under Donald Trump. That was the law. Joe Biden came in. That money was there to finish the wall. And what did he say? He said, there will be not another foot of wall constructed on my administration, not 1 inch. In other words, and people reminded him, they said, well, that's illegal. And he said, no, we're going to do an environmental study, endangered species. It was all disruptive. I'll give you one more example. When he was vice president, he gave a talk before the Foreign Relations Private Foundation. Okay. And he was bragging that he had gone over to Ukraine and fired Victor Shokin, the prosecutor. He said to Poroshenko, I want him fired. Now, everybody on the left said, well, that was okay. He was crooked, Victor Shokin. Well, now we find out and they said Rudy Giuliani made it up that Shokin was looking into Burisma. He was. He was looking. We know that as a fact, aside from the testimony of Shokin that said he was fired because he was getting close to Hunter Biden. But the fact checkers, but that's irrelevant. The point I'm making is that was congressional approved money, $1 billion. And Joe Biden was named by his president, Barack Obama, to be in charge of that. So he flew over to Ukraine and he leveraged them. He said to the President Poroshenko, and I'll read it, and this is what he said, not what I said. So Biden is now relating this to the Council on Foreign Relations in Boston, bragging on himself after the fact. I said to him, you're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving in, I think, about 6 hours. I looked at him and I said, in 6 hours, if the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. And then Biden said, well, excuse my language, everybody, because if you have youth, but he said, I'm going to quote it, I think it's very powerful. He said to Poroshenko, well, son of a bitch, he got fired. In other words, what he was saying is, I am impounding $1 billion because Joe Biden. So there's a lot of audacity for the left to say, oh, Donald Trump is not spending money in U.S. aid that the Congress approved. You set the precedent. Whether it was the wall or foreign aid, you impounded it all the time. Presidents do that all the time. On the second question about the courts, and we said before that Judge Vargas and Judge Engelmeyer were partisans, and they took it upon themselves to cancel out the executive branch's action. And then when Elon Musk said he should be impeached, or Donald Trump said he was really out of whack, we're going to go through the appeal, everybody said this is a constitutional crisis. And so let me just tell you what Joe Biden said. And this is not about a lower district court. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. They ruled that Joe Biden illegally contravened Congress and federal contracts, and with a wave of the hand in May 2024, for his own political purposes, I would add, he was still a candidate. He canceled the debts of 5 million Americans who owed the federal student loan program. He just did like this. And here's what he said. Everybody listen. The Supreme Court tried to block me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me. I'm relieving student debt for over 5 million. I'm just going to keep going. In other words, the President of the United States says the court has no effect. What if Donald Trump said this about this lower court, not the Supreme Court? If you think that the left honors the court system as if they do, as they've said, they tried to pack the court. Nobody had done that since 1937. That was a black mark in judicial history. And they revived that with Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, in March of 2020, there was a throng, a mob, and they were at the gates of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court was in session, and these were pro-abortion marches. Now, he didn't say to the mob, I expect you to assemble peacefully and patriotically to go to the Capitol. No, 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 no. That was what Donald Trump was impeached for, because they said he didn't, you have to fight like hell, excuse me the language. That's what Trump said. And they said, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have spoke to them. Here's what the Senate minority leader said. I want to tell you, Gorsuch. Now remember, he's out in front of a mob and Gorsuch is inside. So he's naming a Supreme Court judge and threatening him. I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. If any of you are in the parking lot and somebody cuts in front of you and you honk and he comes out and says, I want to tell you, Hanson, you have released the whirlwind and you're going to pay the price. That's a direct threat. But if you think that I'm exaggerating, let me just continue with the second half of the quote. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. In other words, Victor, if you don't back your car out, you don't know what's going to hit you. That was a direct threat. And if you think I'm further exaggerating, not long afterwards, crowds started contravening federal law at the homes of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas, swarming them, including an assassin who traveled all the way across country to kill Kavanaugh. If Donald Trump had said that, if he right now went out to the Supreme Court and said, you did this, you did this, you did this, and somebody showed up at their house, they would impeach him. And so don't take any of this constitutional crisis stuff. I could go on and on. I just, when the Supreme Court ruled about presidential immunity, he said this is fundamentally a terrible disservice to the people of the United States. It has undermined the law, established civil rights and privileges. It's mired us in a crisis of ethics. And then in a State of the Union, he looked right at the Supreme Court judges and said, with all due respect, judges, women, this is about the Roe versus Wade, are not without electoral or political power, and you're about to realize how much. That was another direct threat. And so these people cannot be trusted. They're disingenuous. They always change the rules. The court is wonderful when they have it on their side. When it's not, then it's renegade, it's terrible. They threaten justices by name. Don't pay. There's no such thing as a constitutional crisis with these people. They make it up as they go along.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the right has also been saying, and I think they're more accurate, that justices preventing the executive power from using their power legitimately is equally a constitutional crisis, but that's a whole other story.
There is the constitutional crisis is that two low-ranking federal judges, both with a long history of left-wing activism and appointed by two Democratic presidents, were cherry-picked. I mean, what does Delaware and Manhattan have in common? Nothing. If you're going to do anything, go to Washington. But they found the most liberal judges. They filed this thing. They knew they were activists. And these judges set a precedent. They said that now an unelected lower circuit judge can go in and forbid the Secretary of the Treasury to look at his own employees' records. That's not, if that stands, you wouldn't have a government. And remember that the larger context, we're $37 trillion in debt. And so when they keep attacking, you want to ask them, so you really do want to borrow at 7%? Another $40 million to give to the Chinese gain-of-function laboratory? You really want to borrow another 8% of the BBC's budget at 7% interest? You really want to do that? Do you really want to borrow $250 million so you can train 6,000 left-wing journalists, Reporters Without Borders, and pay 7% to bondholders? 6%, 5%? That's what it's about.
It sure is. So, Victor, the next topic was Hamas. It looks like they are not honoring their ceasefire. Two things about what's going on between Israel and Hamas are the ceasefire not being honored by Hamas, and then also the Saturday deadline that Trump has given to Hamas for the release of the hostages. And I thought wanted your thoughts on those week's stories.
Well, they thought they have we don't know how many hostages are left, 75 maybe. They won't tell us how many are dead. I have a sad instinctual feeling a lot of them are dead. So they thought they were going to use these hostages releases for political purposes because they were almost devastated. And then the remnant, the Hamas leadership, and by the way, they don't tell us who is now ahead of Hamas, because to do so would be equivalent with a death sentence, and they know that. So they staged this. So they started releasing these hostages, and they thought that they were going to stir up the crowd, and they did. And everybody should take a deep breath, because everybody says the poor people of Gaza, they were trying to get at the hostages, and Hamas, of all people, were trying to restrain them. It was deja vu October 7th when they spit on the hostages. So the people of Gaza are not innocent. So anyway, they thought this was going to be a big propaganda. So they got all their fatigue. They came out of their tunnels. They're hiding as cowards in their tunnels, and they're shooting at civilians who disobey them. And now with the international press, they come back out and they get their big 6-footers with their camouflage and their mat. They don't show. The only people on stage that you could see are the hostages. They had masks on because they know that if they show their face, and they were involved in October 7th, the Israelis have a registry now, and that's a death sentence for their murdering. And so they did all this braggadocio. But it's starting to backfire. Because like Trump said, that the 3 hostages look like they came out of Auschwitz, the Holocaust. They deliberately denied them of air. They had dank air. They had bad food, moldy bread. They didn't get any sunlight. They were emaciated. And so it didn't achieve their political propaganda agendas. Everybody was shocked and angry at them. Then they regrouped and said, well, we've got to delay this because, A, there's three choices, and they're not mutually exclusive. We got a lot more that we have to release, and they are in bad shape and worse than these. So we got to fatten them up, or we got to do something. Or two, there's not very many left. They're dead, but we haven't told anybody that. And we're getting to the point now where we don't have very many left. Or three, we got all our chief killers and murderers and terrorists, the guys that we wanted out, and the rest of them are just collateral damage. We don't even care if the Israelis don't release the rest. We got the main murderers. But what they don't understand is not Joe Biden as president. So Trump gets on the phone, no doubt, with Netanyahu and says, at noon, all bets are off. You do what you want. We're not going to tell you what to do. What do you need? You need bunker busters? You tell me what, but you can't deal with these people. And they are losing the propaganda war. And I think when Trump said this admittedly outrageous thing at the beginning, that the people of Gaza should move out, and then they should clear the rubble and rebuild it like Dubai or something, and then let people in that are not related with terrorism or have a passport control and have an international city, not a UN, not a US, not an Israeli, and then let people come back in, but not Hamas supporters. Everybody said that was, I think, AOC, and this is colonialism, this is genocide. But then people started looking at the rubble, and there's some Palestinians who say, I can't say it, but they're going to build me a beautiful apartment building, and I don't have to give 15% of my salary to Hamas. So that is what he was intending, and it's kind of like a subversive idea that he throws out there, and it's like planting something in the ground, and now it's growing, and it's going to have a lot of ramifications. He was meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan, and typical Trump, if you're King Abdullah and you're sitting there in front of the press, and then he starts mentioning the Gaza plan right in front of Jordan will take, and the guy goes, yeah. So what's he supposed to say? Take your billions of dollars of foreign aid and stick it? Is that what he's supposed to say? Excuse the language. He's supposed to say that to the President of the United States? No. No, we don't need your Black Hawk helicopter parts. We don't want them anymore. We don't need them. We don't need aircraft parts from you. We're Jordan. No, he's not going to say that.
Yes, but does he care if he's less than honest with the President of the United States? I mean, it's just like the ceasefire not being honored by Hamas. I mean,
this is part of a larger theme. The United States is not yet done with. It is in decline, but it was so rich and powerful, as Milton Friedman say, that decadence, there's a lot of rot in a declining empire. And we are still very strong. We don't know how strong we are. This president comes in, and all of a sudden he says, this is the landscape. Canada, $50 billion, high tariff. Mexico, $170 billion tariff, $63 billion in remittances, $20 billion in cartel profits. Europe, $500 billion surplus. Is it because we're weak and soft and no, it's because they raise these tariffs. So we're gonna do. Oh, that's terrible. That's horrible. And what he's trying to say is, if you make trade tariff neutral, and you pump another 2 or 3 million barrels of oil, so that we're exporting natural gas to Europe, and you get people in Taiwan, and people in South Korea, and people in Japan, and you tell them that your investments will be safe, and you don't have to deal with the Chinese, and we will buy your products, and you build them here, you've got a potential to make the economy take off like a rocket. And when you look at revenues under his tax cuts of 2017, they went like this. If you can get revenues with deregulation and keep the tax cuts and get all this investment, and you get 3 to 4%, I think it was announced today it's 3% economic growth, go like that, and you can cut back spending, so you're running, instead of $1.5 trillion, maybe the first year $0.5 trillion, the next year $0.25 trillion, and then get to maybe close to a balanced budget. This economy will grow like it did under Reagan. It'll go 6 or 7%. And of course, you can't, now the left is attacking Donald Trump because there were fewer jobs created in the latest economic report from the Department of Labor, and there was higher inflation. And now we're learning that if you've been in power for 4 years, you're not culpable. But if somebody's been in power for 3 weeks and they've been blocking their initiatives, then they're responsible. Another thing, you can't trust the Department of Labor statistics, because we know now that every time under Biden or Obama they issue a jobs report, then it's usually before the midterms, it's very good, or the general election, then finally the correction comes. Oh, under sober and judicious second thoughts, we went over our figures, and they were a little bit optimistic. We have to downgrade the actual number of jobs. And the inflation rate was, it was kind of a little higher than we thought. We all know that. I'm not paranoid, everybody. They do it all the time. And so with Republicans, they do it just the opposite. So that's what this whole thing is about, that this deep administrative bureaucratic state is I don't know what you call it, clearinghouse, a sinecure for left-wing retired officials, politicians, ossified bureaucrats, and they're all left-wing. And they try to, as Anonymous did during the first term of Trump, they try to fight with them. And this time they're declaring war on them. And they're screaming to high heaven, but we're in a cultural war, and we'll see who wins.
Well, I have a feeling that Elon Musk and Donald Trump will win by sheer...
As long as they keep going.
Possible by sheer presence, very important. But they're going to win because the argument's better. The American people, how can you argue against transparency? I mean, that's
we need to remember what the great African-American pitcher said, Satchel Paige. Joe Biden called him a Negro pitcher. He was a very great guy, and he had been discriminated, so he didn't get into the big leagues to his late 30s, early 40s. And he was a wonderful pitcher. He said, "Don't look back. Are you getting too old? Don't look back." And they got to keep pushing, because the more anger that they incur, the more statistics they release. And they're making the Democrats say, we really want that money for Wuhan. Because they don't just differentiate. They don't say, there's nobody in the Democratic side that said, transgender comic book, some guy in a forklift from Ohio has to pay. That's not right. Why does a waitress in Seattle have to pay for, why does she have to pay for Politico? That doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do that anymore. And that they don't make that argument. They just say, he's a fascist, he's Hitler, he's a fascist. It's not going to work. If they keep pushing, because the more they find, wait till they get to the big place. And that is, we all know, Medicare and Social Security.
All right, Victor. We will take a break and come back to talk a little bit about illegal immigration. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So, Victor, we've been hearing a lot about Tom Homan's ICE is picking up all sorts of illegal aliens that have committed lots of crimes. And it seems like, okay, so they already kind of knew where they were, enough so that they can go out and SWAT them, run SWAT operations to capture them. And we had another one this morning, Houston, Texas. They captured this guy who's committed tons of crimes. And I think what our audience is probably thinking as they read that, and I am too, is they knew basically where these people all were, and Joe Biden's administration just didn't go out and capture criminals. I mean, criminals with large, long rap sheets. And I was wondering, can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I can. So when Joe Biden destroyed the border, certain South America and Latin American countries said this is a golden opportunity to do two things. A, pay the United States back for being a Yankee imperialist, and B, saving us a lot of money by emptying our mental hospitals and our jails. So they began sending 500,000 people. I'm talking about Venezuela, Colombia, Guatemala, Nicaragua, all of these countries. Chile, we had Chile illegal alien criminals. And Peru, Ecuador, they were all coming up. And then the Biden team said to themselves, we're just going to open the borders. And when people started to complain about that, well, Lincoln Riley was murdered, or this woman was raped, or this person was beat up, the La Raza group, the immigration radicals, the ACLU, they all said, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, because they needed an argument. So the argument was this: if you go get that murderer or that Colombian that had raped 5 people in Colombia, or that person who's been deported 7 times for felonies, and he's in his home, and you break in and you grab him, there might be somebody over there who's his girlfriend or his mother or something, and they're here illegally, and that's not fair, because then you're going to ask their status and they might have to be deported, because basically they're saying, we're going to break the law, we're going to ignore federal, we're neo-Confederates, we believe in South Carolina 1832 nullification, so we're renegades, secessionists basically, but it's going to, they're going to use these criminals, and they're going to get some good people in the process. So we would rather have the 500 kill, let them go kill, rape, assault, than deport somebody who has not been a criminal. That was their theory. And so then they deliberately, and then the second part of the theory is, then they got together and said, now Mayorkas, he's got kind of, make sure he says Alejandro Mayorkas. So he was a Cuban aristocrat. But he was going to pose as a Latino, and he was going to lie to everybody and say, the border is secure. The border is secure. And they would say, it was kind of like the CNN tape during the rioting, or was it the MSNBC? The demonstrations were largely peaceful, and then the buildings are in flames behind their head. Well, they were looking at all of this. So they said, Alejandro can lie very well. He'll just keep saying it, and they may impeach him, but just tell him that, and our left-wing MSNBC and NBC, PBS, NPR, they will lie, and they will get the narrative. And that's what they did for 4 years. So they knew what they were doing. And now Trump comes in, and he says, these people are running wild, and I'm going to send them all back. And these dictators think he's Joe Biden. You're not going to send them back. You treated them terrible. They came back in handcuffs. No. And he just says, okay, we're 25% tariff, it'll go up to 50. And he meant it. And then they said, well, we're going to have a trade war. And they thought, oh, we have an economy 1% the size, basically the size of Fresno County or something, right? So we're not going to fight you after we took a deep breath. And so then that didn't work. So now they're arresting people. And they knew that where they were all the time. These were the loyal, law-abiding ICE border people. They said they were hitting their head against the wall. They were telling their supervisors, that guy is a murderer, and we know he's in Aurora. We know those people are in Manhattan. We know they're in the Bronx. We know they're in Fresno. And the boss would come back and said, I'm not going to get fired. If we arrest those guys, they'll wait till it all blows over, and they'll fire me. And now it's the opposite. Trump is saying, we will fire you if you do not arrest them and follow the law. So that's what's happening. So now they have the last-ditch effort. Remember, these people are insidious. They never give up. They remind me of the Tolkien character Smeagol Gollum. You can't get rid of him. I mean, you know what I mean? He's like a leftist. You can throw him off a cliff. You can make fun of him. They can threaten to kill. They can't get rid of him. He's just indestructible. And that's what they are. So, I mean, they're inert like Gollum was, and they're weak, and they don't have real power, but they're insidious. So now the idea is the left comes up, well, what are we going to do now when they got the names and they're deporting all these rapists and murderers that we champion? I know what we'll do. Remember all those renegade FBI guys that were tipping us off? And remember all the guys in ICE that were left-wing? Let's just tell the Norteños, Sureños, Trend people, and M13 that they're coming, and then they can't arrest them. So in other words, they're going to break a few eggs on our nice open borders omelet. They'll kill a few border patrol. We don't care. That was their attitude. Pam Bondi has said that if they find the people who leaked them, they're going to charge them with a felony. She's got another thing very quickly. Remember, as Joe Biden set these precedents, he set the precedents that you can ignore the law, that you can impound funds, that you can attack the courts, that you can ignore the Supreme Court. And he also set the precedent that the Attorney General can talk to the President, as Merrick Garland did too, and the President and the Attorney General can do pretty much whatever they want, because we saw that with Merrick Garland. I'm not saying that Pam Bondi is going to do that, but they have expanded the venue of the Attorney General. And the old day was, I apologize that Barack Obama broke the wall. He called Eric Holder, Eric Holder said, I'm the president's wingman. And he disobeyed the first time a attorney general in the history of the United States was held in contempt. He refused a subpoena from Congress, which has put Mr. Navarro and Steve Bannon in jail. Eric Holder that. But the point is that there is no boundary anymore because Biden and Obama broke it. So Pam Bondi is going to work very closely to go after these people that leak. And they also set another precedent with the J6 people. They said, you know what? If you are breaking federal law and you're doing it in a conspiratorial manner, we're going to arrest you. Maybe we'll put you in solitary and we'll kind of think, what will we charge them with? 2 years, 3 years? It's a horrible thing, but they did that. So now they are scared. What I'm getting at, everybody, is I'm not condoning it. What I'm saying is they are enraged and terrified because they know, and I've said this before, if they were Donald Trump and they had suffered as Donald Trump did from them, and they were now in power, they know what they would do. They would go after all of their enemies. So they project that onto Donald Trump. Oh, he's just like us. He's going to go clean house like we would, especially after what we did to him. But I don't think he is. He's going to follow the law.
I think Pam Bondi also is creating a weaponization task force, so she wants to highlight the.
Well, everybody's saying now when we're listening to this, I know they're going to say, Victor, Victor, Victor. If you don't do anything, they'll do it again. So it's not revenge, it's not weaponization to hold the people responsible who weaponize the government. So if you find people during the Trump people, in other words, if you find emails that on the same week, and I think it was in the same 24-hour period, that Fannie Willis's Nathan Wade Paramore was in with the White House counsel, the day that Mr. Colangelo resigned from the DOJ to go work for Alvin Bragg, the day that Joe Biden appointed Jack Smith, a federal prosecutor, and there are internal communications to that effect, then they might go after racketeering or conspiracy, and I think that's a fair investigation.
Absolutely. So, Victor, let's turn to another very interesting topic, especially for a lot of people who've been wondering about this for decades. They are going to declassify files on JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., and Anna Paulina Luna, who is a representative, I think from Florida, if I'm not wrong. She's gotten out in front of it all. I think she's part of the people who are declassifying this. And said that she thinks, from what she's seen, that there were 2 shooters in the JFK assassination. And I thought that was interesting. But your thoughts on the declassification?
Everybody understands the Warren Commission report, given that their reluctance to be candid about certain things that were geostrategic. Remember that everybody said that all these presidential assassinations are always right-wing people. They're usually left-wing people. The Puerto Ricans that tried to kill the Congress people in the 50s, left-wing. The people who, Squeaky Fromm, that tried to kill Gerald Ford, left-wing. The 2 Trump would-be assassins, they were left-wing, or they dealt with left-wing. And Lee Harvey Oswald was a communist. And he went down to the Mexican embassy and met somebody from Cuba. So I think why they withheld it was there was a feeling or a fear that the CIA under Kennedy had tried to overthrow the Castro government at the Bay of Pigs. And they were not sure whether Castro had been talking to people from Cuba or had enlisted help from people to Cuba. I'm not saying that's the narrative now, but at the time, people said the Warren report did not discuss exactly where Oswald was, what he was doing, why he shot John Kennedy. And the answer was the CIA and the FBI do not want to tell people because they might feel that they're culpable by trying to overthrow the country. And then there was the other conspiracy theories that Bobby Kennedy or somebody might have had mafioso. Judith Exner was one of the girlfriends of a mafioso that was involved with the Kennedy brothers. So maybe there was something that he either got on the wrong side of the union, I should say the mafia-controlled union, Teamsters at that time, and Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, etc. So there was some talk, and I don't know if that's going to be in the records or not, but that's why it was sealed. The other thing is there's some pretty graphic autopsy reports and photographs of Kennedy. I was 10 years old. I remember it was 1963, November 22nd. I was in 4th grade, Mrs. Pystrup's room. I can tell you the exact second it happened. I'm just thinking of that right now. I was in class, and we had an African-American student, Ruth Bottoms. I remember her. She's a good friend of mine. And Mrs. Pystrup said, "We have just heard that the President of the United States has been shot." And Ruth Bottoms got up and started crying in front of everybody and said, "This is so terrible. He was my favorite president." And then everybody started crying. And then me being a nerd, I said, "We have to get to the bottom of this, Miss Pystrup." And so I got on the bus, and I was dropped off at my grandmother's house, and I ran out. And the Fresno Bee came at 3 o'clock in the afternoon paper, and I ran out and I got it, and I took it, and Lila, my crippled aunt, goes, "Victor, read it to me, read it to me." So I read it to her, and we were all very upset. And went for 4 days in November, that was 4 days of mourning. And so it was a terrible moment, and we never got the full, I don't think we're going to get the full story, but we're going to get closer to the full story.
Do you think that what do you think of the argument that there were two shooters?
Well, there was always the grassy knoll theory, and people heard too many shots for the amount of casings that he did. But when you look at it was an Italian, I think it was a 7.5 millimeter, I can't remember, it was an Italian bolt action that he'd ordered online with a scope, but he was a very good, he was classified as a sharpshooter in the military. And for years, different groups would take a kind of like a railroad track, and they would put a cart on to simulate car the same size, and they put somebody, and they would have the same angle, and then they said, "Can you shoot?" Said 3 shots, I can't remember, but one going, the first shot did not kill him. It went through this area and was a clean wound. It might have disabled him. And then the second shot's the one that hit him, and then there might have been a third shot. I think Governor Conley was hit, and I think that was from the first shot going through him. But anyway, people tried to see if you could replicate that in a minute, and they did. They found sharpshooters in the Marine Corps and the Army, and there was a number of studies afterwards and said, "You're Lee Harvey Oswald. This is the moving car. Can you take this old Italian and shoot?" And they could. So we don't really know what happened, and anybody who says that the Warren report was absolutely factual is wrong, and anybody who says that the Warren report was completely bogus and is wrong. Somewhere in the middle. That they were worried about implications if they divulged all the theories of who shot Kennedy. First, it was a Cuban Missile Crisis and everything. There was things that were going on that we didn't want to know about, supposedly. And Trump, this is very ironic, isn't it? Because he's supposedly not transparent. He's a dictator. He's an autocrat. He's Hitler. And he is the most transparent president. He's letting everything out. He talks at the stream of consciousness, anything on his mind. He's met with more reporters in 3 weeks than Biden did in 2 years. So he's he's completely transparent, sometimes to his disadvantage.
So, Victor, I wanted to then now turn to a short topic here. Tulsi Gabbard was just confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. I'm really happy that she got it and that they confirmed
Lisa
her.
Murkowski and Susan Collins and Senator from South Carolina, Tillotson, I don't forgot his name, but they had been holdouts, wavering, and after the big thing was, it was kind of like, are they going to withhold the floodwaters? And they thought that Pete Hegseth was going to be the dam that would stop the Trump flood. And when Pete Hegseth got confirmed by the vote of J.D. Vance, that meant they needed to get they needed 3 defections and 1 more because the Vance could break. they moaned and they got angry, but that's exactly what Kamala Harris did. She bragged about it more so than Vance to break these ties. So after Pete Hegseth, then the momentum was with the Trump people, and I think they nominated Gates, because he was going to be censored when they didn't want that report being published about his extracurricular activities. He was going to take a lot of flack. Then they're going to say, oh, I guess he just can't get confirmed. He'll have to quit. And then the Republicans got him out of the House, and then they paid some IOUs, and then the Democrats got a scalp, right? But after that, they drew the line. And what I mean drew the line, they went to Susan Collins and they went to Murkowski and they said, you know what? We're going to run ads against you. Maybe you're going to run for re-election or not, but we're going to run ads to you. This is what I'm imagining this, but people have talked to me about it. And we're going to show your votes for Pete Buttigieg. You voted for Lloyd Austin and Pete Buttigieg, and you voted against Betsy DeVos. Can you imagine that? And she was a wonderful Secretary of Education. So you want that? Or and you want to be in line, you want to be in the same league with these hysterical people that are screaming like Mazie Hirono, women must be believed, that woman, and Elizabeth Warren. And you want to be in that? Because that's who you're going to be with. You're on the Pete Buttigieg is okay, and they folded it. And so now they're all going to be confirmed. And as I said earlier, I've met her a couple of times, and I spent an evening with her when we were joint speakers in the same billet, and she was the most polite, considerate public figure I've met. She was. She wasn't just a congresswoman from Hawaii. She was at one time the left wing's future of the Democratic. She was, I think, Democratic National Convention vice president, and she was on that debate stage entangled with all of those people. Elizabeth, especially Kamala Harris, she kind of destroyed her. And so this was a major defection, and they were not going to forgive her for that, but she got confirmed, and RFK will get confirmed, and Kash Patel will get confirmed, and Jay Bhattacharya will get confirmed. Another thing that's happening is the 8th floor of the FBI, they're starting to clean out, and the NIH announced that you're not going to be, you universities out there. This morning I came back from Stanford, so I'm kind of tired. I just got up very early in the morning. I drove my 4 hours, and they are insane. They are so angry. The provost sent us all a letter. We're going to lose $184 million. And I said to a colleague, "Do you see that?" Yesterday it was announced. He said, "Wow, Stanford can only charge 15% on all the hundreds of millions of dollars they get, and they were charging like 50 up." And I just said, well, every culture has a term for that. The Greeks called it nemesis. Ancient India called it karma. The vernacular in the United States said payback's a bitch. The old 19th century motto was what goes around comes around. But if you take a wonderful scholar like Jay Bhattacharya with a MD and a PhD, and you demonize him because he co-signed the Great Barrington Declaration, said that he questioned the efficacy of the quarantines, he questioned the efficacy of the boosters, he didn't say don't take them, he just said I don't think they'll stop you from being infected or infectious, and they tried to destroy him. And we have that with Fauci's email when he goes after him. Well, now he is the Omega is now the Alpha. And so what I'm getting at is that they're going to be confirmed, and somebody's going to ask Kash Patel, did you fire all these FBI people? I'm not confirmed. It happened before, and they're going to say to Jay, did you do this 15%? It's going to kill little kids and all that stuff they always say. It wasn't confirmed. In other words, they're doing a lot of the necessary work before the confirmation, the acting heads of these agencies, which is smart. But the main thing is, I'm on the Bradley board, and when we give, we're a philanthropic nonprofit, and when we disperse grants to individuals within organizations, sometimes that person has an office or power. If you give it to Heritage or AEI or Public Policy or Pepperdine University, and you give that, most of them allow it just to go straight to them. A few say, well, we have to get 10 or 15% because they have an office and power, but no one ever would give, we would never give a grant for 30, 40, 50%. That's what these universities are doing. They're shaking down the federal government. And you know what they're also doing? So when the Gates Foundation or these other private NGOs give them grants for medical research, they don't charge the same amount of overhead they do the government. And that's coming out. And so, yes, Stanford, I have a little message for Stanford University, my alma mater, and also where I work. If you're worried about a $183 million shortfall on your grants, you have about 16,000 graduate students and undergraduates, and you have, according to the Wall Street Journal, not Victor, 15,000 administrative staff. I think about a quarter of them are DI. Why don't you just allow them, just have a hiring freeze and say, we would encourage you with it, like the Doge, we'll have you a 6-month buyout or a year. We will pay your salary and then go. And you will find the 183 million. You'll be leaner, and the faculty will love you. The left-wing people will do the following. They will scream. They will yell, this is Donald Trump. This. And then privately, when they go to the faculty lounge, they're going to go, wow, that DI guy's not going to call me up about my syllabus. Oh, wow, they're not going to look at my grading patterns and say that I'm systematically racist. Oh, my God, we're going to get the SAT back and competitive evaluations of GPA. We're going to get good students based on merit, and I can go back and assign 7 authors instead of 2, and I can actually, instead of giving 80%, that's what it is, 70 to 80% at Stanford, A's, I can go back and give, 20% A's, and they're not going to call me a racist or sexist or transphobe or homophobe. So they're going to be happy. So that's all they have to do, but they won't do that. They'll scream and yell, and we're supposed to feel sorry. Everybody shed one crocodile tear and move on.
I like that the dean told Donald Trump and Doge how much money they could keep from Stanford, $180 million. Way to go.
I mean, he just said that we lost $183 million. And I'm thinking, well, would the office still be there? Would the lab still be there? Were you the only funder of these government labs? Didn't you have these people teaching and working? And they had all sorts of grants from all sorts of different people. And how many of your grants were not, is this particular procedure a good cure for breast cancer? Is there a new way of teaching, reaching people with terminal bladder cancer? Versus, was this an underserved community that was not given the booster as promptly? Was this zip code? That's what you were doing. You know you were doing that. Because I've been reading some of the grants, especially from Stanford, and there was DEI up, just up and up, no cover up, just blatant. This is what it is. We're proud of it. And now they have to pay the penalty.
Pay the penalty.
It's really ironic because I know Jay Bhattacharya a little bit, and I've watched him and Scott Atlas be the targets of the biggest bullies in the world. So before you, again, everybody, before you feel sorry for Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they practice anti-Semitism. There was a big report at Stanford that makes it pretty much as bad as Columbia or Yale, 900 pages, written by a colleague of mine, Larry Diamonds, very factual, man of the left, very disinterested, systematic anti-Semitism. We can see it on campus. They had the Hamas people breaking the rules for almost a year out in the quad with their camp, and nobody did anything. They trashed the president's office. They ran wild, and now people are saying, it's a whole new era. It is. I was on campus the last 3 days, the last 6 weeks, pretty much every week, and it's just, I can't, everybody's, you mean there's no DEI? Well, I was always kind of against it. There's a meeting there's a meeting in the department how to protest DEI. Oh, I have a doctor's appointment. I can't make it. I just can't make that DEI. It's horrible that they cancel, but, or the more candid, I don't want to get on a list that I was against DEI. They're kind of employing the same tactics that we did. Or, wow, I don't think I'm going to go out and say from the river to the sea because Donald Trump said he's going to go after anti-Semitism, and I'm not going to call for the destruction. I think I'll take my Hamas scarf off that I was wearing and my little green flag, because I might be promoting terrorism. Oh, I have a student visa. I'm from Dubai, and I've got to get this Stanford MBA because I got to get a $500,000 salary. I don't want to be suspended, because if I'm suspended, they have to turn my name in to the State Department, and I'll be going back to Dubai, which is a beautiful place, but it's not a place where you can say you hate the government of your own country. And the nice thing about the United States is that they're stupid, so we come over here and we call them racist, and we demonstrate, we tear down Jewish posters, we light fires, we desecrate monuments, we spray paint colonnades that are historic, and then we say, screw you, America, you have no right to criticize us, we're your guests, we hate you. We hate you so much we don't want to go back home. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk a little bit about the prisoners that are being released to Donald Trump. Stay with us, and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor on his social media. He is on X, and his handle is @VD and he's also on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So come join him there. Well, we got a prisoner back from the Russians, Mark Fogel, who was there for about 3.5 years. He got arrested under Biden for having medical cannabis with him.
I think it was.
Yeah,
I wouldn't, if I was Mark Fogel, and he was a teacher that had been all over the world.
Yeah.
If I went into the Soviet Union or China, first of all, I wouldn't go, to Russia or China. I wouldn't go in those countries. But if I did, I would go through every inch. If I had an arthritis, I would take every Gumby out. I would take every vaping out. I would take anything that had anything to do with a illicit drug, even if it was illegal in the United States, legal here, because what the Soviet Union did, what Russia does now, what China does, what Iran does, they have criminals in the West, Europe, the United States. They have spies in the West, and they are convicted and they're sitting in jail. So they are scanning everybody who goes into those countries, and they are X-rating every inch of their luggage, their person, and they are trying to think of any little misdemeanor that they can find so that they can say that these are international drug smugglers or drug dealers. And then they hold them until we get upset because we have a different standard of humanity, and then they exchange that person. Donald Trump didn't say who was released, but we know it's going to be some big Russian spy or criminal cartel or Russian mafia, somebody that's horrible. And then that's what they do. So the only way to stop it is two things. You can do the cruel, callous way, but maybe it's not so cruel or callous. Just say, don't go to those places, because if you do go there, they're going to arrest you for any, and then we're going to have to let out terrible people. And that's on you, not on us. We can't help you. Or once they get caught, just say to Putin, okay, if you want to do that, it's not symmetrical, but we're going to take it out on you. And Trump apparently did all that. He's threatened tariffs, he threatened everything. But in the end, I have a feeling that there'll be a much more nefarious figure let out than a medical marijuana transporter. And that's what Putin does.
They said that there was somebody that was being released, but they wouldn't give his name. He's supposed to give his name today on Wednesday.
We're broadcasting today, but maybe they will. But we know from Biden, we let out some international gun runners, illegal weapons dealers. They were terrible people. He paid Iran $6 billion for hostages. That's what they do. They appeal to Western sense of humanity. And then we're a free country, so we don't tell people, if you go to the following 6 or 7 places, you'll be likely to be arrested for the most minor, so don't go. If I were Trump, I would just put a travel ban on all those countries. You can't go to China, you can't go to Russia, you can't go to Iran, you cannot go to Cuba. Any country that does that, and see what happens.
Well, our last topic for today is Fort Bragg has become Fort Bragg once again. So during the Biden administration, they called it Fort Liberty, and now they're changing it back, Pete Hegseth says, to Fort Bragg. And I was wondering your thoughts on this renaming.
Well, Pete Hegseth had an insurmountable problem. He comes in, and he's got generations of special forces people who were trained at Fort Bragg. So if you talk to those guys, they always thought, when I was at Bragg, or I met him at Bragg. So Bragg was institutionalized. And so then Obama raised the issue first, but they didn't dare touch Bragg because of the support. Biden came in, and after the George Floyd, there was momentum. So they said they were going to change the name of Southern generals, that these bases are named after. And they got the usual, Petraeus came out, they got all the generals, Petraeus came out, McChrystal came out, you got to change the name, because it was named after Braxton Bragg. Braxton Bragg, everybody, was a typical Confederate general, but he was not very good. He wasn't, you can call all these people slave owners legitimately and racist, but he didn't have the brains of Nathan Bedford Forrest. After the Battle of Shiloh, Nathan Bedford Forrest almost hit Braxton Bragg. He said, we won the battle on the first day, and you lost it on the second. And we had the Yankees up against the river, Tennessee River. If we had just gone into dark, we would have annihilated them. And now you let them live, and General Buell is here to relieve them, and now we're going to lose. And they didn't listen to him. So, and I could go on about Braxton Bragg during Sherman's march and everything. He was just completely incompetent, and he was stubborn, and he was mean, and nobody liked him. But when they started after World War I to make these bases, because they knew that after the war we needed military bases, and the South was depressed after Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow, and the stigma of the Civil War, and it never recovered really to the same degree from the Civil War as the North did. It had been devastated. So the idea was also these were one-party states, all of them, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Louisiana. By that I mean there was only the Democratic Party, whereas there was a two-party system from 1870 to the present in the North. But in the South, you didn't really have a Republican Party till the 1970s. So what that meant is that people like James O. Eastland or Strom Thurmond, they would be elected every year. And the Senate and the House were based on seniority. So when you looked at the Senate's Armed Services Committee or the House Armed Services Committee or the House Appropriations or the House Ways and Means, they were all Southerners, and they were segregationists. And so they said, and they were all against the federal government spending what they called internal improvements. That goes back to the Civil War. So they said, we've got to rearm, and we've got to have bases. And so the Southerners said, well, you should have them in southern regions where it's warm, so you can deploy in the winter and train. You don't want it in Minnesota, Alaska, North Dakota. So we want them in places like the Carolinas or Georgia or Florida or Texas. And they said, okay. And then they said, well, you guys are segregationists. And they said, okay, we're going to hold up we're not going to arm at all. So the compromise was that they made a number, Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, and they named them after Confederate generals. Unfortunately, they didn't name them after people who were good, like Fort Lee. They did have a Fort Lee, but not the big ones. And they didn't name it after Longstreet, because he had worked for the Northerners after the war. He was a brilliant general, great guy, worked for the Northern. He was a reconciliationist. He wanted to So they named him after mediocre generals. So then we come along under Biden and the George Floyd, and we got to say, get rid of that's our segregationists. They had a point. And then everybody looked at it and they said, Pete Hegseth, when I met, he had a dilemma. It was like, well, it's so ingrained in the American mystique. If you're a special Bragg. I went to Bragg. I don't want to change the name. I want to go back to Bragg, but I can't, because Braxton Bragg was an ignoramus, and he was an artifact of this weird compromise when they built the bases. I got a solution. We'll go through the whole list of heroes in all of our wars, and there must be somebody named Bragg. And they found a person in World War II who had fought heroically, a private, and in the Battle of Bulge, and they said it's named after not that Bragg, but this Bragg. So they've changed the official name to his name, and they just released it. And I probably will have a statue of him. And it's not. And every time the left says you're racist, it's not Braxton Bragg. You're the racist. You keep wanting to honor. It's a different man. It's a man that fought heroically in World War II. And because we're an egalitarian society, we are honoring somebody who was not a general. So that's square the circle. Brilliant little compromise.
Yeah, that was a brilliant little compromise.
Pete Hegseth is really coming into his own. He was in Europe at a defense conference of like-minded defense ministers, and it's so funny because he's not a grandee. You know what I mean? He's tattooed and young and buff, and TV guy, and they were all deferring to him like, we need the United States, Pete. And then he was working out. I don't know if you saw the thing, that he decided to go down into the gym with the Army. He's out jogging, and he's making heroes out of all these special big guys that are muscular, and he's out lifting weights, and he's young. It's very different from past secretaries. And it's going to be very hard to criticize that because it's very egalitarian, populist, and that's what's so weird about all of this, because you want to say Donald Trump is a billionaire and he's for all the aristocrats and the billionaires, but then you look at them and it's like Elon Musk he says I'm autistic and he wears jeans and he has terrible little houses he lives in. And then you look at Tulsi Gabbard, she's sui generis, I don't know. And then there's Robert Kennedy, and he's demanding, we think about the poor little guy and not Big Pharma, and they're defending Big Pharma, and then you get Pete Hegseth, and he's not coming in from Raytheon like Lloyd Austin. He's not going back to General Dynamics, Lockheed. And Jay Bhattacharya is a apostate that took on the whole NIH. It's just very hard to categorize them as the usual Mitt Romney, wealthy, white, male, aristocrat, wealthy guy who didn't talk to his garbage man and put his dog on the top of a car. You can't, because they're
There's something very refreshing about that,
hoi
too.
polloi. I shouldn't say they are hoi polloi. You can't say the hoi polloi, because hoi means the. They're not the polloi. They're hoi polloi.
All right, Victor. So this is the end of our show, and we'd like to thank our audience for coming. Make sure you note that Victor is currently on YouTube and on Rumble. So we are doing video casts, and they are distributed both to YouTube and to Rumble. So we're welcome to come visit us there. And thank you, Victor.
Everybody was to behave today in the farm studio, the new farm studio. The dogs, the Queenslands, were on their good behavior. The spray, the operator our friend who was spraying the almonds, was quieter. His spray rig detoured around the house.
This is going to be published on Valentine's. Do you have any big plans for Valentine's Day?
If I'd have known that from the beginning, I would have been kinder and softer, gentler.
Yes.
George H.W. Bush figure.
Well, have a good Valentine's Day as it is, and
happy
to all of our
Valentine's
audience,
Day.
too.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
This is Sammy Wink and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you for listening again.